We need to begin to engage people to do practical. Now, let the government roll out some initiative whereby they will begin to say, right, subsidize ICT training for everybody to go in there to learn one or two things about computer, about IT, and so on and so forth.
Now, if the government has been able to supply books, it's a part of the learning process for anyone who wants to gain experience. You must have some background knowledge of what it is that you want to do.
Yeah.
Now, even if you may not have been exposed to computers and all of those stuffs, which is very important in this present age that we are in.
Yeah.
But if someone has been able to give you a book to read, I think it's something that should be commendable, and it's now left to you to go a step further, not just to read the book, but also to also practice what you've read in the book.
It is commendable. I mean, that's quite good. But I gave you a textbook on human anatomy or on biology, for example.
Okay.
Then
someone who is a medical student, for instance.
Yeah, then you're just engaging in reading the books, the theoretical part of it. Now, what about the practical part? No, it doesn't. You see, it's like saying, I go to university or to an institution to study medicine. When I graduate, does that make me a doctor? Of course not. If I go to university to go and study accounting, and when I graduate, does that make me of course not. You still have to go through the practical process. Now, so the books is one thing, fine, but the practical, which we're so much used into reading books and theoretical part of it, but the practical aspect, which actually bring you out to become who you are, to be able to do what you're meant to do, it's not. We're lacking on that aspect.
Now, is this pointed to our own educational system? Because I understand that in some part of the world that you are given more to the practical aspect of it, not just reading. Can we see that our own educational system may have contributed to this?
That is where I will actually have to talk about the government or the institution about this, because if you look into most of our institutions these days, I mean, you have too many tertiary institutions, low quality tertiary institutions producing very low quality graduates. Now, when people don't have the means or the mechanism to actually aid what they read or what they've been taught in school or in classes, then it wouldn't help them to be able to be who they want to be when they finish their education. So the practical aspect is actually quite very important for them to be able to, that will complement the theoretical aspect of what they've actually studied.
Okay, there's been a lot of issues about having to develop our own people.
Yeah.
And, you know, Nigeria's main source of revenue is crude oil.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to believe that the government is doing to ensure that it develops young entrepreneurs in the country, which has to do with the practical part of it right now, having to put your hand on the plow and get the yam from the farm or something. It's to ensure that they shift attention from the white-collar jobs, having to work in oil companies and all of that. Do you think it will achieve this purpose?
Let me just set a good example in here. You see, I always say to people, it's like saying everybody wants to do business. Some people have no business in doing business. Business is not for everybody. Similarly, going to university is not for everybody. We should look into apprenticeship scheme.
Even if going to the university may not be for everybody, but you're still expected to acquire some kind of knowledge somehow, whatever you are.
Okay, I'll ask you a question. If you are a company and you need to employ an auto engineer, for example, and I happen to be one of them that went to the best university in this country, and I'm a graduate of auto engineer, as an auto engineer, then you have another person who actually went to a company like RT Briscoe or Kocharis and do apprenticeship scheme of 2 years. Now, who's actually obtained the necessary practical experience? Now, who will you employ? A fresh graduate from university who studied auto engineering, or the person that's gone through practical apprenticeship scheme for just 2 years? Who do you think is going to have a hand on?
Okay, so business is not for everybody, and many times a lot of people would think that if you don't go to school, especially in this part of the world, there's really little that will come out of your life, except now that things seem to be changing. I think it's about a perception about how do you grow up and get the best out of yourself.
That again, we're talking about parental influence. You see, before I actually came out to this country a few years ago, I did a 2-year research into the catalog of, or the reasons why we have this catalog of problems. And one of them is what I just mentioned now, which is the parental influence. Now, a lot of our parents, I mean, we're used to say, okay, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be an accountant, I want you to be this and that. But forgetting the fact that is it what the child naturally or is actually wanting to do, or gifted to do, per se. Now, at the end, look at what we have now. You have medical doctors going and becoming an artist, singing. You have engineers or qualified, big, becoming something else. Now, because you have just kind of like wasted or pushed this child to do what they know. So what are you meant to do as a parent? Study your child. Look at what he or she loves to do right when he or she is growing up. Then you could be able to identify as a parent that, okay, let me tailor this child towards this, what I think he or she knows how to do better, rather than influencing them and enforcing them to go and do something that they know particularly want to do.
Okay, let's move, looking at the employers of labor as those who, after you've employed somebody, looking at the years of experience, sometimes employers do not really go a step further to expose that employee in training and giving them the necessary kind of expertise that is needed in that case.
That is one of the major problems that actually obviously going to talk about.
Okay.
But it's great that you just asked me that question. The government has initiative in place whereby, I think according to the law of within our labor constitution or whatever it is, we're meant, as an employer, you're meant to engage your staff or your personnel, your employees in some sort of training, depending on what department, what they do, what they've been employed to do within the organization. Now, but what we found out is most employer doesn't want to spend money or invest money in training their employees. Now, the ITF, I've been to the ITF office quite a few times, and I engaged them in kind of like a discussion to find out the basis of why they've been established. And it was a very great initiative, to be honest with you. But how many employers actually understand the reason why the ITF was there? I've spoken to a large number of employers. They don't even know the reason why they have the ITF in place in the first place. You're meant to pay a contribution when you have a certain number of employees to the ITF. Then in return, if you train any of your staff, you get a percentage of that money you've paid to them back. But how many employers understand that? It's not really, the awareness is not really there, to be honest with you. Now, and also, I went to a company in this Lagos, along Maturi Way or something. And I saw the MD, and we had a meeting with them in the process of trying to sell our services to them. And I asked them a question. I said, what are you doing about training for staff? They have, I think, around about 30 to 50 staff in there. And the MD told me into my face and said, we don't train. And I said, you don't train? You manufacture, I think they manufacture plastic products and so on and so forth. And he said, we don't train, but we just employ. And I say, if you don't train, how do you expect your staff to grow in knowledge? It will add more productivity to what you're doing. And the guy just said to me, we don't have a plan in doing that. Now, my take on that is, the government should inform all the agencies involved to begin to enforce that. If you have more than 5 employees working for you, you must be able to train those staff. But in return, the government should be able to have an incentive being given to them, maybe tax rebates, or maybe train a number of staff and you get this back. So all these sort of things have to be put in place.